Okay, is that working? Can everyone hear me? Thanks, Peter. Thanks very much. Okay, everybody. Wow, what a great crowd. Okay, who here has had a startup idea sometime in their lives? Come on, you must have thought, I've got an app for that. I can't tell you how many times I've had a phone call where somebody said, "Oh, I've got a great idea for an app." It's quite a fun conversation to have. Right, I'm gonna walk you through how to turn your idea into a startup. I'm going to go probably almost a full hour, but I'll try and keep it interesting through that, and then we'll have some Q&A interactive stuff going throughout, and if I ask you questions during, do try to answer them. Okay, first up, a little bit about me. So I run a venture capital fund. I'm a co-founder of that. The fund's been going for 5 years. We've done 10 investments. We've looked at 420 opportunities in those 5 years. So it gives you an idea of the kind of very fine filter that venture capitalists like to put on deal opportunities. So 10 investments out of 420 opportunities. Of those 10 investments, I was responsible for 4 of them. I do the IT software technology investing side of things for Yuuwa. We have another 6 investments in the biotech, medical device, life sciences kind of space. Those are the guys who spend lots of money and take a very long time to do things, and my little IT guys, they spend very little money and do a very short time to burn it and die. Or fly. And the ones that I really love are the ones that are flying, and one of them is the one that we did together with Spata, which was the first investment for Yuuwa Capital, which is a company called Ideation that does video analytics, and it's a really cool business if you want to have a look at it at some stage. Other than running a venture capital fund, I'm also a mentor for the Founders Institute and a number of other programs in Perth. I've also helped with Startup Weekend, and I'm now a lead mentor for a accelerator which recently launched in Perth called the AmCom Upstart program. And Upstart, we just had the pitching stage of applicants for Upstart. That is Upstart provides $40,000 in new funding for somebody who has a business idea or the early stages of a startup. So $40,000, and you go into a 3-month program where you are coached through creating your product and getting out to a revenue or fundraising stage. We had 74 applicants from Perth and around Australia. We had 12 pitches last week, and 8 of those are going to get up and get into the program starting from June. I'm also an angel investor, so I put my own money where my mouth is sometimes and actually invest in these startup companies. It's a very high-risk thing to do, but I like to de-risk it by actually being involved and helping the startup guys get going. A lot of the work that you do as an investor in startups is psychology, to be honest. You know, provide a shoulder to cry on for the CEOs, give them a G up when they're feeling a bit down, let them know that they should feel confident to just have a go and to spend a little more money than they have in the past because you've just put $1 million behind their company, for example. Right, so we're going to walk through this kind of from idea phase through to funding phase for how to get your startup going, and yeah, feel free to kind of shout out if you really want to ask a question. So first up, I want to deal with the ideation stage. Like, how do you find an idea that might, you know, do well as a business? Now, generally, I'll be talking about making money. I'm also happy to talk about making social return and doing businesses that have a positive social influence. But most of what I look at and what I invest in is oriented around getting a decent financial return. It's always a great bonus when you can invest in something that's going to change the world for the better as well. So in terms of finding ideas, I always find that the best place to look for ideas is where are your pain points? You know, what really annoys you about what happens in your daily life? It might be a very specific job that you do within the university. It might be how you go about your classroom participation. It might be catching the bus home. There's all kinds of areas of pain that people have turned into startups in the last 10 years. And the beautiful thing about startups these days is that the barrier to entry is so incredibly low. You know, 20 years ago, people had to buy servers, they had to have an infrastructure guy, they had to connect to the internet somehow. These days, everything's out in the cloud, and you can have a startup up and running in the course of an afternoon if you really, really want to and you have a little bit of technical capability. Another area to look for good pain points is anything that involves repetition. If you see people doing things again and again and again, then obviously there's something wrong. I have to admit, it's kind of like an AA class. I really love Excel, right? And when I find myself doing something in Excel that's really repetitive, I get frustrated and I search on Google. Why do I have to do this so many times? And generally, I find either a really cool macro or a fantastic formula that I've never come across before because somebody else has felt that pain and they've created that solution. And that's the kind of thinking you have to go about in deciding whether you've got an idea for a startup. What is causing me pain? What is making me do things multiple times over? How can I make that easier and share that with people? The other thing to leverage is new waves. So new waves means kind of new technology, new things that are happening, changes that are happening in the environment. If you look at what Uber has done to the taxi industry, which is the most common example, the Uberification of everything, that's a great example of where people have seen, well, there's an opportunity where things are not working the way they should. There's these crazy taxi companies who have all this control. There's taxi businesses which have a single rate except after certain times of the day, but there's no kind of proper pricing according to demand. You know, there's a wave of change out of that, and technology enables that change to happen. Other waves are things like NFC, near-field communications, or wearable devices. There's mobility has been a massive wave over the last 3 or 4 years. These are all areas where almost anything you do will result in growth. If you build an app and it's a unique app and it makes a difference for people, every year you've got millions more users buying iPhones or Android devices and a potential growing market. So even if you only get a tiny, tiny slice of that market, you at least know it's a growing market, which is different to investing in non-smartphone technology like old Nokia phones or whatever, something which helps people with SMS. SMS is dying super fast because messaging is replacing that. So that's a wave which is going down. What you want to be, if possible, is on a wave that's going up. Recognize these waves, see what's happening. Watch what's happening in the US. I love ideas which are based around stealing things from the US. Have you guys, who's heard of Rocket Internet? Anybody? Okay, so there's these 3 brothers in Germany called the Samwer brothers, S-A-M-W-E-R. It's worth looking these guys up, they're really funny. They own a venture business called Rocket Internet, and their business is entirely oriented around execution. They steal ideas from people in the US who are doing really well in Silicon Valley, but haven't quite got around to getting to Europe yet, and they roll it out fantastically well, and they make billions of dollars doing this. Right? And I'm going to come back to them in just a moment. The next area for looking for leveraging what you know, for ideas, is leverage what you know. So if you have deep domain knowledge in a particular industry or segment, if you have a job that you understand really, really well, and you can find a pain point in there, that is a point of differentiation. And that point of differentiation means your startup has more legs. And you have to think of all the thousands and thousands of other people who are in that kind of job around the world, not just within your local confines. You might be the only one of 4 people who have that kind of job in all of Geelong. But when you multiply it out for all the Geelongs that there are in the world, it can be an enormous marketplace. And if you hit a pain point and you solve that pain point really well, you've got yourself a really interesting startup. Always dive deep. Dive deep into the problem. Don't just deal with surface issues. Try and find out what is the real issue that I need to solve and how am I going to go about that. And when you dive deep, you uncover gems. You'll be surprised how often, when you're dealing with a basic, simple problem, that you find some really, really complex challenges. Sveta and I just today were off chatting with Bar One Health, and after the meeting we were walking back to the car and we were talking to each other and we said, wow, this is pretty challenging. There's some really complex stuff here. And the answer to that is, of course it is, because otherwise somebody else would have done it. Right? It's got to be challenging and difficult, and we'll come back to that in the presentation as well. So I mentioned the Samwer brothers and Rocket Internet, right? Execution always beats an idea, right? Many people have 5 new startup ideas before they eat their Weet-Bix in the morning, but those are people who are never going to get anywhere because they don't get off their butt and do it, right? And doing it is the most important thing. There's this famous quote from Woody Allen. What is it? 80% of success is turning up, right? So if you want to be an entrepreneur, turn up, have a go, get out there and execute. There's another really good summary of the difference between an idea and execution, which was done by a guy called Derek Sivers in 2009. For those of you who are a little bit mathematic here, you can take the multiplication factors here and work them out. Awful idea is a -1, up to a brilliant idea of 20. No execution, $1. Brilliant execution, 10 million. Right? You need to get yourself, down towards the bottom of each of those lists. But what that says as well is that a brilliant idea with brilliant execution is worth about, what is that, $200 million? 20 times 10? $200 million, yeah. $200 million would be a pretty nice exit, but that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. And the guys who started Many of the billion-dollar businesses that have sprung up in the last 5 years, many of them only own about $200 million of their idea now because they've done Series A, B, C, D, E, F from various different venture capitalists, and they've been diluted all the way down to a very small stake in a very, very large business. Right, so once you've got the idea, it's really important to get out and validate it. For those of you who have heard of the lean startup methodology, it's something that a guy called Eric Ries wrote about. It's all about going out and testing your idea to see if people really like it and if it really does gel. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to have said, I've got this great idea for a business, I've spoken to all my friends about it, I've spoken to all my colleagues about it, they all think it's brilliant. And then I say, and how many of them have given you money for it, right? Because there's a huge difference between somebody giving you lip service and saying, that's a great idea, you should go and do that, to, okay, give me $50 and I'll give you 1% of the business right now. It's a massive difference to somebody reaching into their pocket and giving you money. So always, always seek to validate your idea into cash if you can. There's a program called Startup Weekend. They run them in Melbourne. I'm hoping that at some time in the not too distant future they'll be running them here in Geelong too. And over the course of Startup Weekend, people go from idea through to execution, and they try to get validation sorted out. You spend Friday night pitching ideas and forming teams. The teams then go out of the building where they're all working together during Saturday morning, and they validate those ideas by companies, surveys, asking people on the street, calling up executives on their weekends, finding out who's going to actually pay for this idea. The ones that get the best marks when the judges look at things on the Sunday evening are the ones who've got dollars. They can stand up and say, look, we made $20 asking people on the street if they'd like another messaging app, which would be pretty impressive, I have to say, because I'm a bit tired of seeing messaging app pitches. But anyway, it gives you an idea. So the important thing is go beyond just talking to people, go to the point where they're going to say, look, if you build this, I will actually give you cash. That's a fantastic response and a really positive endorsement for your startup idea. So you've got your idea, you've got a little bit of validation, go out and seek a mentor. Try and find somebody who's been through the journey. Look through your circle of friends, it could be a family member, somebody who's a little bit entrepreneurial and been through the business journey. Bounce ideas off them. Don't take it as gospel. Work out whether they're people you can work with longer term as well. You know, you want to have a good relationship with this kind of person. You want to sort of learn as much as possible about what lies in the path ahead and what things might trip you up. Beyond your circle of friends and family, the local startup community can be very active and very interesting. Your lecturers here at the university, local businesses, and always try and seek people who will challenge you, who will help you to learn and grow and advance. Don't just try and find people who are yes people. You want people who also say no to you. You don't always have to take their advice, but you do need to show them the respect of, I'm not going to take that advice because I've thought about doing this differently. Yeah. Okay, so you've got yourself a mentor, an idea, you've done a little bit of validation. One of the most valuable contributions to business planning that I've seen in the last 5 or 6 years is a business model canvas that's been developed by a guy called Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pignot. I don't know if I said that right, but anyway. And this business model canvas is a one-page business model. The third investment that I did, we had a business model like this, which was about this wide and covered in coloured post-it notes, and I took a photo of it and I attached it to the shareholder agreement and said, there's the business plan. A one-page business plan. You can get everything you need into one page these days, and there's little apps and there's online versions of this which are free. It's a really great product. I'm going to walk you through all the different elements of it, so even though it looks like a total eye test, don't worry, we'll dive in a little deeper. This is a great way to start thinking about your idea, okay? And one of the key things before you even get to this point, if you've got an idea and you've gone out and validated it and so on, especially if it's an app-related idea, do a search online, do a search on the App Store about it. I can't tell you how many times I've had a phone call from somebody into my office, oh, you're a VC, you invest in startups, I've got this great idea for an app. And I say, cool, tell me about it. So they then tell me about the idea for the app. While they're talking, I type into the App Store the keywords of the description they've just done. And I hit enter by the time they finish their sentence. I say, wow, that's really interesting. Have you thought about, and then I read out the list of all the apps that do exactly what they've just described to me that are on the App Store. And they're like, what? There are apps that do that? Yes, there are. Look, there's these apps just sitting there right on the App Store. People can't believe that their ideas are not original. It's very, very rare these days that you have an original idea, but you do have excellent execution that beats original ideas. Okay? Facebook wasn't the first social network. Friendster was way ahead of Facebook. Right? MySpace was ahead of Facebook, but they both executed poorly. Facebook executed fantastically. Groupon, for those of you who know about group buying, there was a business in 1998, 99 called Mercado, which did exactly what Groupon does, but there was no Facebook effect, there were no social networks for them to get out. They have a whole bunch of patents which Groupon had to buy because they were in big trouble if they didn't. But these ideas were around much earlier than these companies who executed well with the ideas. All right, let's walk through what sits on a business model canvas. First up, I like to drill into your value proposition. So let's talk about product. All entrepreneurs love talking about product. Generally, I can't get them to talk about anything but their product when they come and pitch to me because it's a very, very passionate space. What most financiers and investors want to hear is about what's your business model? How is that actually going to make money? Okay? And a value proposition is a much better way of phrasing what your product does. So what are you delivering to the customer? What problems are you solving? Okay? And then how do you get that together for your different customer segments? And customer segments are a crucial element of any business plan. One of the most hyped words in the startup community is focus. Always try to have an absolute laser focus to your customer segment that you are delivering to. If you can sort out a product that captures 60% of the left-handed squash players in Geelong, right? I will invest in it because you have smashed that particular market. Getting 60% of a specific tiny niche is much better than telling me you're going to get 0.5% of the world population of females, right? I don't believe that as an investor. What I do believe is execution on a focused level. So it's really great to go down to a customer segment level and say, look, okay, this appeals to lab technicians who are cleaning out pipettes, and I am giving them a product which ... right? And I presented it to 100 lab technicians, and I got 85 of them to sign up on the spot. That is a fantastic endorsement for your product idea. So key activities. Okay, we've got an idea of what we're proposing to our customers. What do we need to do? What are the things, what are the steps along the way? Who do you need? What teams? What team members do you need? What kind of relationships do you build? How are you going to collect revenue from these customers? Yeah. There are all kinds of really awesome online payment systems these days. It's incredibly easy to get up and available and gathering credit card details from people. But are you going to charge monthly? Are you going to charge one-off? Are you going to have, a subscription business? Start to think about your pricing. Read about it. And what resources do you need for that? Oh, I need to sign up to Stripe. I need to have Amazon Web Services enabled. What about my distribution channels? Am I going to go straight to the App Store to get my app out? Is it going to be a web app? How am I going to promote it? Am I going to use Google AdWords? How am I going to attract the customers into it? And again, it keeps dragging you back to that same point. What are the revenue streams? And one of the key elements of this canvas is it forces you back to that point of a business model is about making money. A business model is not just about your product. It's not just about your market. It's actually how you turn that into cash coming in the door. Rightio. So who are we creating value for? We've picked a very tiny niche where we've decided what value there is and what are the most important customers. And what space am I going to be sitting in? If you're doing a consumer app, right? And again, I'm always, like, as a VC, you always hear the pitch from everybody talking about, Instagram, they had no customers, but they had millions of users and they got sold for $19 billion to Facebook. That is such an exception. It drives me mad. I just wish Facebook had never bought Instagram because it's horrible. Everyone else I talk to, I'm like, no, if you're trying to get revenues, you might actually stay alive longer because Instagram swallowed millions and millions and millions of dollars before they got that exit. So if you're targeting the consumer space, how do you get every consumer to pay you $1 like WhatsApp did? Right? First 12 months free, then we'll charge you $1 a year, and they got millions and millions of users, and suddenly they were worth billions of dollars. Getting people to spend that first $1 is very, very challenging. If you're going mid-market, SME business, small and medium-sized enterprises or medium-sized businesses, what's going to be your monthly subscription? Are you pricing at $50 a month, $500 a month? If you're going enterprise, who's going to be your first reference client? Because generally speaking, enterprises are never going to be the first person. They're always going to say, tell me somebody else who's using it and making money out of that application. And then based upon that case study, you might get your second sale and your third sale, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So who are the important clients that you have to close early? And then you need partnerships, right? Very often your suppliers become your partners. Very often your supplier... Oh, sorry, I thought I was running out of time. Very often your customers become potential acquirers as well if you're doing a really great service, or your distributors if you're distributing through another large business. So what are we buying from our partners? How are we going to interrelate with them? What kinds of agreements do you think we might need? And what are the important elements of that? And very often when you're doing these developments, your partners might be design firms, or they might be people who know about putting together particular products who go beyond just a commercial relationship. This is a point which many entrepreneurs skip, which is my channel to market. These days there's amazing channels. Like I invested in a business called Discover that did visual representations of music recommendations. And this app, it went live the day after I invested, and within a month it was the #1 app in 30 countries around the world on the App Store. So it's incredible these days that you can put something up on the App Store and be available in 140 countries with 140 different currencies being paid into your account. It'll be translated, but into Apple's account, and you getting 70% of that at the end of the day. So channels have been solved to a very large extent by all the app stores that are out there these days for app-type applications. But if you're doing an enterprise application, there's another kind of channel you have to think about. Am I going through a distributor? Am I going direct sales? Am I going to be selling at conferences? Am I knocking on doors? Is it just the friend network? Is it referrals only? You look at how Atlassian have grown, which is this incredible business out of Sydney. It was mostly word of mouth that they grew. They spent almost nothing on marketing. And how are you going to test? Within your business plan, you need to talk about how you're going to test different channels to find out what works best. These days, in terms of online channels, most people start with AdWords, then they go to Facebook advertising, then they try a bit of Twitter advertising, and then before you know it, they're spending a fortune on LinkedIn advertising. And you need to find out, what brings in the most leads that convert well. Yeah? And you have an average cost of acquisition, which then gets applied to those leads coming in. So you might get 100 leads, you might convert only 6 of them. But if you've only paid $100 for those 6 leads and those 6 conversions pay you $100 each, that's a pretty good ratio. That's the kind of ratio you can go out and think about raising money on, because 100 turns into 600. Good equation. And what is your cost structure? So most software businesses, the 80% plus of the cost is the staff. Yep. And so when you're raising money, you need to think about how much does each staff member cost, and how many staff do I need to get to a point where I can start paying all their salaries. When you're doing a $50 a month subscription business, that's a lot of subscriptions to cover the monthly salary of one person. Right? Average person, fully weighted cost, $10,000 a month. How many customers is that at $50 each? It's a lot of customers. And people don't really do that kind of equation. They think, yes, another $50, you beauty. I'll go hire somebody. Do it many more times than you might be able to. And then how can you leverage that money up as well in your cost structure? The Australian government is very, very generous in terms of research and development, and there are a lot of really interesting matching grants out there, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But once you do raise money, or you're getting customer money coming in the door, make sure you leverage it up. If you're spending that money on high-risk software code development, put in an R&D tax claim and you'll get about 42 cents in the dollar back, which means for $100 of customer money coming in, you get $143 of development. That's fantastic. There's very few countries in the world which still do that, which is one of the reasons Atlassian still has their inclined development group here in Sydney still. Well, not here in Sydney, but here in Australia. And then what are customers willing to pay for? And how are you going to price that? Right? There are companies which price by gigabyte of data, like Dropbox. Right? It's a very close association. You get more value from more storage, so you pay more for that storage. There are other companies like Salesforce, which charges per seat. So every salesperson who's accessing Salesforce, you charge per seat. There are other companies like Palantir, which charge for processing. If I process a terabyte of data through my servers, I will charge you a certain amount. Working out your pricing and how your pricing aligns with your customers is a really important consideration with your business as well. So how do they prefer to pay? And what different elements will come into your business? Sometimes you'll get some consulting revenues to initially make an enterprise sale, and then you'll get a big upfront payment, and then you'll get a tiny maintenance fee. Sometimes you can charge a monthly fee, and you have to work out what's best for you and what works. Rightio, and we've made it to the end of the canvas. So now it's time to find a team. And the optimal team from an investor's perspective is a team of 2 people. One who is really deep on the tech capability and one who's really deep on the commercial domain. So usually you have a highly capable commercial person who really understands that industry or market, and you have an incredibly capable technical person who can write the software to make all that happen. Very seldom do you get the 2 in the same body, although it has happened in the past. However, one thing which is very important is you shouldn't found your company with the idea that you are going to be replaced in the future. Very often, the founder of the company is the best person to see that company all the way through. Look at examples like Steve Jobs. Started Apple, booted out, oh dear, Apple's going in a hole. Come on back, Steve, things are rosy again. Oracle, still run by the guy who founded it. Facebook, still run by the guy who founded it. There's a lot of businesses where you can't underestimate the value of the passion of the founder to keep driving that business forward. But still, if you can get that nice sort of balance between commercial and technical, it's a really good equation. The next step, which I think is really important, is if you've got an idea and you don't have very much money, which almost nobody does when they start out, use a very manual approach to deal with your early customers. Tell your customers they're getting a highly customized, automated machine learning solution, and then go home and do it in the evenings, right? Manually. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Just look at the big explosions, everything's... So the app will appear as if it's doing these incredible things when actually you're just manually doing it all. And through that, you will learn what code you have to write so that you don't have to manually do it anymore, right? And that's the Wizard of Oz approach to software development. Build, measure, learn, and then build it again. And keep iterating and iterating until you get to a point where you can start to scale that minimum viable product and make many, many more customers comfortable. And that's why you have these closed betas. That's why you start with maybe only 10, 20, 30 customers, if that, to learn and to be able to adapt to their requirements over time. Okay, this is a video which you can look up on YouTube. There's a warning about the language. It's very, very rough. But Alec Baldwin talking in Glengarry Glen Ross, and he talks about always be closing. This is a video that all my entrepreneurs that I invest in, I say you must watch this, because the biggest problem startup software entrepreneurs have is taking money off people, because they never think their product's good enough. They never think they're close enough to justify demanding any money from somebody. And this tells you that every lead is a sales lead, every meeting is a sales meeting, and every overlap with anybody is a funding opportunity. And the best form of revenue, of funding, is always customer revenue. So always be closing an opportunity to get cash off somebody. Every discussion across the barbecue, as you're turning the sausages, talking to your dad's best mate, who happens to have a business that does something similar to your startup, consider it a sales opportunity. Try to turn it into money, not into a bloody free trial. Please, no more free trials, okay? Because entrepreneurs love giving free trials, and they consider that validation. That's not validation. That's somebody taking something for free. And they will always consider your product as a free product thereafter. It's fine if you give it to them for a month, knowing that you're going to bill them $500 for month 2, right? Get them excited and hooked. That's fine, but not an open-ended pilot free trial kind of thing. Unless you're just in the learning phase. I'm talking about once you've got past that. Always be closing. A very important message for all entrepreneurs, and investors respect that massively. When you come in and talk to a potential investor, be it an angel or a VC, and you've actually got yourself some revenues behind you, it is so much more powerful than the average idea or piece of software. And that's where we get to the next point, traction. Traction's a very common word. Does anybody know what this is? It's actually it's a traction trebuchet. So a whole bunch of guys pulling on rope all concurrently. That square bit there is actually a horizontal bar. And patwang, the guy lets go and off flies the rocks a few hundred meters away to smash down the castle wall. So what you want is for your business to be flying through the air, right? And to prove traction, you need to get certain numbers happening. Those numbers can be numbers of consumers who've signed up to your app. How viral is it? For every one that I buy through Google AdWords, I get another 5 users because they always introduce it to their friends. It can be customers, so small, medium businesses. You're getting sign-ups really rapidly. You're securing them for a certain cost for each customer. And if it's enterprise businesses, you can start getting endorsements and feedback from those customers about how much value your product is delivering. But for most investors these days, traction really means dollars. Because it's so easy to get these businesses started, you need to get a prototype out the door. Even if you're Wizard of Oz, a lot of the features, like doing it manually, but somebody's paying you, that's a fantastic endorsement. And you can generally, on the back of that, raise some funding if you want to, or at least start using that funding as a source of bootstrap to grow. So save your money, bootstrap your business, put your coins aside, and you can grow these companies really brilliantly these days. As I said, the cost of development and startups is incredibly low now, to the extent that a lot of venture capital firms in the Valley and across Australia as well are becoming micro VCs so that they can participate in tiny little seed rounds where they're putting $50,000 to $250,000 into companies just because they don't want to miss out if their business goes ballistically large and never needs another funding round. So in terms of raising money, the famous triple F is friends, family and fools. That's an area of funding that I would go to very cautiously. I have my own startup experience, so 8 years ago, 9 years ago, I don't know, it was a while ago anyway, I got approached by a guy I'd been advising on his business, and he and his wife had this awesome idea for a new website where parents could share advice on how to raise their kids. And I didn't have any kids at that time. But he said, have a look at this website. It's called Wikipedia. We just found it. It's just entered into the top 100 websites in the world, and it's screaming through the ranks and growing really rapidly. So we searched on Wikipedia, and I discovered that Wikipedia had been founded about 6 years earlier. It was bigger than Encyclopedia Britannica. We're talking 10 years ago now, and had one staff member through all that. And I thought, this is the business model for me. I hate staff. You know. I love stuff where people just do things for you for free. So off we went, and we raised money in the Perth market to launch this platform that allowed everybody who was frustrated with raising kids to share good advice with other people and allow that advice to be ranked up and improved in a collaborative manner. So it's kind of like a mother's group for the whole world. You go to the mother's group, you share advice on what got your baby to sleep, but instead of that, you go across the whole world and people write really cool things. We raised $2.7 million and got this business up and running. Had all kinds of issues with execution and so on. We white labeled it, licensed it, had some money coming in, but ultimately wound that business up with a very, very poor return for everybody, i.e. probably 99 cents in the dollar lost. But I learned a lot of good lessons, and out of that came my experience with the VC fund. But when we were doing our initial raise for that business, my co-founder and I, we sat down one afternoon and we said, let's write down a list of the richest people we know, personally. And we wrote down all the rich people we knew, anyone who had a house worth more than about $1 million in Perth. And we had a list of about 22 people, I think. And then we wrote a really nice email to these 22 people, which talked to them about the idea and said, we'd love to come and present to you about this business we're starting up, if you'd like to hear a bit more about it. At that stage, my space had just been bought by News Corp for $520 million. So it was kind of semi-hot, this whole idea of Web 2.0, where people put information into the web and it comes back instead of you just reading stuff in the web. So off we went, and our presentation was 2.5 hours long because we had to educate people about the internet. They didn't really know how the internet worked. They knew how email worked, but they didn't know you could actually go to a website and comment and add things into it. And at the end of the presentation, many people would say, well, look, that was really great, but I live in Perth and I invest in mining and property, so I'll see you later. I don't do technology. And I was like, okay, fine, but do you know anyone else who might be interested? And through that, we ended up presenting to about 40 different people. But through the course of that, we raised an initial $1.2 million just through friends, family and fools and people who had money who understood our pitch and were convinced enough to put money into it. And you can still do that today. However, today there's much more organised ways of doing it, like accelerators, like the Amcom Upstart program that I was talking about earlier, $40,000. That takes an 8% stake in your business and helps you raise the business through a 3-month program. There are organised angel groups across Australia now. There's a very active group, the Australian Angel Association in Melbourne. There's crowdfunding opportunities. So Kickstarter, for example, has funded some enormous businesses out of Australia. There's LifeX, the light company. Anyone heard about this business? Yeah? Stick your hand up if you've heard of LifeX. It's a Melbourne-based business. Good, 2, great. So LifeX developed an LED light globe that you could control wirelessly from your phone, and you could change colour, set it to disco, if it match it to your music, all this kind of thing. They built a prototype and they stuck it up on Kickstarter, and I think in the end they raised $8.5 million or some ridiculous sum. Their target goal was something like $300,000. Over the course of a month there was this massive demand. That became a business which has since raised money and is doing very well. There was another massive success, I think it was on Ingogo, for a guy in Queensland who developed a beehive which has a tap on it. And the bees go in, they make their honey, and instead of you having to put on the bee suit and get out things and get stung and all this kind of stuff, you just walk up to it with your jar and you fill that up with fresh honey and off you walk. And this guy has raised something like $6.5 million in the course of a few weeks. It's a fantastic story, both Australian organisations. So crowdfunding is a really interesting source of customer revenue, because effectively you're selling a product that you haven't built yet, and people are saying, yep, I'm going to pay for this the minute you supply it to me. And that's a fantastic way of getting money in from customers. Venture capital is an option that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, being a venture capitalist, because venture capital investors are looking for massive returns, 10 times returns, and they're very sophisticated investors, which means they put pretty nasty term sheets in front of you if you happen to fail. So if you do well, great, fantastic. If your business is already on the trajectory to do well, then venture is a great way to get funding and to get a lot of expertise and knowledge into your business. If you're in the very early stages of an idea, or your business isn't already on a decent trajectory, then I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as your early source of funding. Once you've got funding coming in, as I mentioned, always leverage it up with grants. There's Commercialisation Australia, Oz Industry grants, matching grants of up to $1 million. Dollar for dollar matching. There's also the R&D tax concession, where they'll pay you for losing money every year. So if you've got a tax loss, you'll get a check in cash for losing all that money because you invested in R&D. It's pretty awesome. And then, of course, I've already mentioned customers as a great source of revenue. So what's the journey going to be like? It's going to be tough and very challenging, but you're off for that big goal, right? I often describe going through the startup processes as wading through feces, but the rewards are incredible. It's that classic example of high risk, high reward. The joy you get out of that first customer who signs, or that, it's just giving tingles down my spine thinking about the entrepreneurs I've seen who have done this, who've taken an idea through to a point where they start getting revenue coming in. Where you wake up in the morning and you look at your little phone and it's pinged because Stripe has charged 3 more customers last night while you were sleeping. How cool is that, right? That's my kind of business. Go to bed, wake up, more money in the bank. But it's hard work, and it's really hard work, and you should go in with no illusions about that you're going to battle a lot of barriers and a lot of people saying no. And many investors say that the most important characteristic of entrepreneurs that they look for is resilience. Resilience to just keep on keeping on. The Airbnb guy is a fantastic example. He went through an unbelievable number of pivots before he finally decided that, yeah, this is actually going to work. There were all kinds of weird and wacky businesses that Airbnb was before it became the proper Airbnb it is today. But at the end of the day, he persisted through all that crap and made it to the end. And then if you can do that, look what you can create. Start up you. And that's what I want to see. I love seeing entrepreneurs achieve their goals and to see people grow in in their dreams and seeing their dreams turn into reality. It's the most satisfying part of my job by far. And I hope there's people in this audience that go ahead and do that. It'd be really wonderful to see. And doing it through Sveta's program and the support of Deacon, what better way? I think it's really great. So that ends my presentation. I'm Matt. I want to thank Fake Grimlock for a lot of those good startup-y images. And if you follow me on Twitter, I don't post very often, but I post pretty good stuff. So feel free to pick me up. And we'll do some questions. Thanks.